Hi, she's Trixie, and I'm Sarah, and this is our yarn world, a place where we come to share the love of yarn crafts and what it gives us and what we hope it gives you. And we are on episode 101 today.
Yes, we are in the 3 digits.
Yes, so it's one of those things we're getting used to. It's kind of fun. We've been here for a little bit.
Yeah.
And, for doing these videos in the fashion and in the style that we normally do and how we normally kind of have it flow, we're kind of doing something a little bit different today. Not necessarily in the order, but what we're actually going to be talking about fully today. So
Yeah.
we hope that you enjoy it. We're kind of excited to just kind of...
To share it with you.
Yes.
Everything. So the first thing is that I was able to finish 2 blankets.
It's been 2 weeks since we saw you.
Right. And I had a lot of the first one done already. I just had to finish it and then make the second one. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if you recall, but the last time I had brought this up, and so it's 2 strands of 4-ply yarn using a 10mm hook and doing half double crochet. Now, I paired all these variegated with white. So I have the pinks and the roses and reds, and that went down into the purples, and the purples also have the magenta in it, and then we have more purples and teals in this section, and then down into the full teals and blues. And I had 3 balls of this teal and blue, and Sarah had mentioned maybe I should just end on that and then, start another blanket or whatever, so it wasn't ending heavy on just this one color. And I thought that was a good idea. Now, this one has been claimed by my granddaughter. Her favorite colors are pink, purple, and teal. And so when she saw those colors, she's like, that one's for me, right? And I'm like, well, it can be. I wasn't starting out that way, but that's okay. The second one, therefore, has to be for Mr. Caniel, because as I have discovered, with summer coming up and everything, I got them a little kit together with some paints and, watercolor paints and all that. His only desire is to use the blue paints. So using this teal and blue is going to work out very well for him. So I started out same way, half double crochet, double stranded, 10mm hook, and with the teals and blues. And then I had a magic ball with all kinds of blues in it, and then break back down into the teals and blues. I used both of those extra balls that I had started with on Olivia's and used it for Caniel's, just to end it well. Mm-hmm. And I think on his, I had to do a couple more rows, so I went and found one that was more like a slate blue, a darker blue. But I think it worked out well because it flowed. And so, and that was my whole thing, was just the flow of the colors going from one to the next to the next.
So Olivia's was a solid, a variegated with a solid. Mm-hmm. And this one was a variegated with a solid, and then it would kind of go in between 2 solids to a variegated, depending on where it was in it.
Yeah.
So that's the difference in the little bit of the pattern that you can see in both of them.
But they're both the same size, which on an adult would only be a lap blanket, but for these, for a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, it's gonna be a nice blanket for them to, when they're over at Nana's house, to have.
Yeah.
For nap times, laying down on the floor when they want to watch their tablets, if they want to just lay on the floor and watch a movie.
Or read a book.
Or whatever. So it'll be something that they can do, have for themselves here.
Yeah.
And they'll know their own colors.
Right. Well, it's kind of cool because, you weren't making them for any individual. It wasn't like you were like...
I didn't start out that way.
Yeah, you weren't just... You just were kind of like... You were like inspired to use your variegates up in a flow.
Yeah.
And these were the colors that you had.
Yeah.
And then it just worked out to being calling out to the people that I called out to, even if it's the littles that just are constantly wanting all your crafts to be for them.
That's okay. You know, and I'm using up my scraps from my own stash. And so it's, you know, it's all good.
I like the pink, red, and white. Olivia's been really liking red.
So that helps.
So
all these colors, she's gonna end up liking the whole rainbow.
Yeah.
She's a color girl, just like Nana.
She's been enjoying orange.
Orange too.
And yellow.
She tells me that too.
She likes her yellow giraffe shirt right now. And she was talking about how yellow was a good color yesterday, or like a favorite color too. But I don't know if that was for what reason she was saying that.
It's a bright, happy color.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we were dealing with a bit of, you know, sibling rivalry, so I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, those are really great.
Yeah, yeah.
When we last saw you, we did a questionnaire, and in the questionnaire for our 100th video, we were inspired to pull some questions from a questionnaire that was about a traditional art form.
Yes.
And to question a traditional artisan on their art form and how these questions might draw out some really interesting answers out of them for how and why they do what they do, and what they look for as, you know, for its specialty or its, you know, maybe authenticity. I don't know, but it was. I thought the questionnaire was really, really interesting, realizing that, you know, there is a difference between kind of like a hobby art and a traditional art form, or something that is an acquired art form maybe.
Or a generational.
Or however it, or even like maybe an ethnic one where it's like kind of more for your, you know, your side of the world, or your people, or whatever it be, however you word that. I thought it would be interesting, taking it from what I understood, to kind of look at it from a frame of view of, if crochet and knitting are somewhere in the world considered a traditional art form, where?
Right.
And I also kind of went down the wormhole of trying to figure out the history of both of these crafts and figuring out where they came from. I did not do a deep dive study or anything. This was more of like a, hey Google, what do you got to say about this? And whatever its intentional, well understood historical fact was about it that popped up first, I took and kind of wanted to present to you today. So I don't know if I might look for an actual book or an actual history on this where I can actually read it and see it much more like someone who's actually taken the time to collect all this information into a novel or, you know, a book. But I will see, because I thought that would be kind of interesting to read about after hearing this. So just typing into Google history of crochet, it popped up this. The true origins of crochet are shrouded in mystery and remain largely undocumented. Some sources suggest that crochet originated in Arabia, where it spread along Arab trade routes, to other parts of the Mediterranean. Others claim that crochet has roots in indigenous South American tribes.
Wow.
Which is so fascinating, because the reality is that it could have originated from two separately different parts of the world on its own time. Like, human beings are very creative, regardless of whether you you were taught it or not. People have used different materials to create in very similar patterns. I mean, you don't need to be a woodsmith on one side of the world to be trained to just be inspired to use a block of wood to make something on another side of the world. I mean, that's not how that necessarily works. But then you think about the fact that one side of the world has a certain type of a wood art form, and another side of the world has a different sort of wood art form that they're known for. So it's kind of like it didn't take either one of them sharing the art form. It just took them wanting to be creative and then deciding how they wanted to be creative in that way.
Isn't that something?
So I find this interesting because it's like, there's only so many ways that I know of to be able to manipulate any sort of strand of material, whether it be from plant or plant fibers or even animal fibers.
Right.
Or even leaves, or however you want to manipulate and weave or crochet or knit or however that works. But the fact that people have even figured out over time the art of using the hook or the art of using the needle, and it's something that you can see in different parts of the world at different times, and they probably don't even coordinate with each other. It's just like, people are just so smart.
And they're so creative, too.
Yes. So when I dived deeper, there was a question that was already kind of like in the people also ask section after you've typed in your into your search engine, and it was who invented crocheting. And I was like, okay, well, if they don't obviously know, then what is this answer going to be? Well, they answered with the first person to have documented and published a pattern. So in 1829, the first crochet pattern was written by, I can't say this woman's name.
A mademoiselle.
She was the daughter of a French father and an Irish mother. She is known as the mother of crochet and said to be the creator of the Irish crochet style, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But Ireland has a very rich history, apparently, with the art of crochet and knitting. Even if it's originated in other parts, it seems like this woman kind of stirred the pot when it came to, like, it's documented and maybe, like, a place where it kind of became known for it because they started writing patterns and they started becoming craftsmen of the trade and started becoming, like, when you think of it, you're thinking of like Celtic designs and Celtic patterns, and all of a sudden that makes sense.
Right.
Because you think about that and that makes sense because if you have been in the crochet or knitting world, you've heard that before. Well, it's because, at least from what our history has shown, the most well-known history documented and obviously well received pattern was from someone that obviously had roots in Ireland. I don't know how to say her name, and if you literally just look up what I've looked at, this question of who invented crocheting,
or mother knitter. I see mother knitter.
No, that was not. It's not the same website, Mom.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
Okay.
She was known as the creator of the Irish crochet style. So if you just look that up, the next question that I got sucked into was which is older, knitting or crochet? And like I said, these were already typed in questions. I didn't even think of them. But history says knitting textiles survive from as early as the 11th century CE, but the first substantial evidence of crocheted fabric emerges in Europe during the 19th century.
So 1800s again.
So there's obviously, it's just really interesting.
And that's 1,000 years ago.
The 11th.
The 11th century.
Yeah.
So that's interesting too.
Yeah. I then looked up the history of knitting, and that answer ended up being knitting has a long and fascinating history that originated in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean around the 11th and 12th century. The earliest knitted artifact are Egyptian socks from that era. And knitting then spread to Europe, where male guilds used to make religious garments.
Show them that picture.
Okay, I'll try.
They're funky socks.
Yeah.
Nothing like you'd see today, I don't think.
I think they're designed that way because of the sort of, and I'm saying that as in like I'm assuming, I'm not trying to just be presumptuous, but I do know that Egyptians were known for like their sandals or shoes that had that solid bottom, but then they strapped on in some way. They didn't have like an overtoe or something.
Right.
It was like a strings that were manipulated to then keep that bottom part onto the bottom of the foot. So what we would call sandals. I know that there's other names for them, but
So that makes sense to have that kind of a toe then.
yeah, so that's kind of where I was thinking, like, depending on how you fasten, like, if you're thinking of like a normal, like kind of like a flip-flop or a sandal, depending on how you brought in that strand or how the shoe was crafted, having a sock that had kind of like toes would allow you to be able to slip into that shoe. So I think that's why they're crafted like that.
And I think it's interesting that the males were the ones that were doing the knitting back then.
Well, it said that once the craft had spread into Europe, it was known for that male guilds used to make religious garments by this craft. So it's one of those things I've said before, but I really like the fact that this art form is so diverse in the aspect that I could make a toy that can literally be batted around by a cat, whereas you also have this art form also be something that if you take the time to make it with great materials and with great love and care and intentionality, it can be this masterpiece. And it's not like that isn't for all art form, right? Because you can make a little trinket with a wood or compared to a huge masterpiece of wood, or like, kind of like maybe this really majestic bed frame or
a quilt.
Or I was thinking like other ones, like you have people that make those stone necklaces, or you have like Michelangelo's, like
Sistine Chapel.
Or no, I was thinking like his
David.
Like they're made out of marble, right?
Yeah.
I think so. They're made out of some sort of stone material, from what I understand. And so it's one of those things, right, where it's like you have. All crafts are diverse. I understand that there's a range in how you can use that craft, for what purposes you use it, whether it's just for the essential basic needs, whether it's just for fun, or whether you are planning to make this really, really intentional masterpiece. I find that so interesting. And I recognize that obviously with yarn art, or just the knitting world or the crocheting world, garments are something that obviously can be made out of that. But the fact that it became such a staple of religious garments, of like, this is, we're not just using cloth and sewing it together, we're not just weaving it, we're making the intentionality that we want it to have this look, this texture, and this style.
And this color. So
that it was uniform, and it was set, and it was in some way obviously respected and revered, if it was in a religious aspect. And I don't know what religion or it was for It
No.
just says
Yeah.
religious garments. So that's...
It could have been monks. It could have been anything.
I don't, yeah, I have no idea. Obviously from there, when you go down from the history of knitting from my search engine, there's also, you know, what else people asked. And in that I saw this question and the answer for it. And it was, what culture is knitting from? And obviously we just kind of answered that more or less, but I find that very interesting that both of them kind of seem to be drawn into the Mediterranean area. Because I feel like that was what Crochet said it was too, right? Mm-hmm. From the Mediterranean area. So it's very obvious that there was heavy influences in that regard. When you look up, I kind of got suckered into the idea of, you know, what countries are most known for these crafts. I don't know how this list speaks for today. Like, I can't tell if it's like a history as like this country is the most known for it, or in what sense, or whether this is just more modern day. This is kind of like
this is what it is right now,
right, as of right now, not just in a collective history. But I think this is a right now list for knitting. What countries are most known for it? It seems like the list has varied, because when I looked it up, it did change depending on one resource. Okay. But I feel like this is probably true, because what you even mentioned when you had seen it, New Zealand, Iceland, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia were like the top 5. But for me, it's kind of like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's because I think most of these are very cold areas and they need warm clothing, and knitting with the wool and all that would make it very warm material. Right.
When I looked up in that same train of thought, I don't remember how I got to this question, but it was, what country is famous for crochet? And it says crochet's earliest history is from this resource was rooted in Ireland, where the craft helped provide much needed income during the desperate time of the potato famine. Obviously, if we look long back, we already have our answer that both of these crafts are very much heavily documented and or said to be seen in the Mediterranean area. But obviously we know that crochet written patterns really started taking momentum in Ireland. So I think that that's kind of where this is kind of coming from, the understanding, because we obviously already mentioned that. But I just think it's so interesting, because even just saying it like this, Ireland obviously has a very specific history when it comes to knitting and crochet, especially crochet, because obviously not only were the written patterns kind of the first documented there in a much more greater sense of probably going out to the world, that they would be known for it, but the fact that they used the craft to be able to pull themselves out of a famine is like really kind of cool. I know that when you and I have watched other YouTubers that document their crafts or crafting journey, when they're in places like Europe, you see like these, like almost like these town events where like everyone's out and on the street doing it, and we don't have that sort of thing here in America.
Well, some people like to do it, walking down the street.
No, not that. What I'm talking is, like, it's very evident that the history and the calling to do it in that manner is a little bit different.
They celebrate it a little bit different.
And I think it's because of these histories.
Oh, yes.
And these respects and these traditions and all these, these things that we don't think about maybe on this side of the world, just because the craft doesn't maybe have the same level of significance for us. Right. It's not that it isn't important or valued or respected, just more of a, it doesn't have the same like almost nostalgic historical impact, I right. guess, as these locations. So I thought that was interesting. I know I was kind of jumping all over the place, and I wasn't trying to be
I think
spastic.
It's very interesting.
I wasn't trying to be spastic on you. I was just trying to kind of explain where I got some of these questions. Not all of them were my questions and where I got them from. Just the fact that, you know, Google has that whole thing of, you know, you can search for something, but then now they have that bar where it's like, people who have asked similar questions ask these questions as well, and they just have the answers already prepared for you if you're looking for them.
Yeah, so that you can just keep going.
So I just kind of went on this rabbit trail, and that's kind of what I was trying to explain. But I'm really hopeful that maybe I can find a book that kind of has the history of both of these art forms more well fleshed out and documented, where I could read it and kind of maybe share with you more concise facts, because I think this is kind of interesting. Like I said, we kind of had that questionnaire pop up. We thought that we could apply it in our own way. We weren't trying to, you know, misrepresent the fact that there are obviously more traditional art forms, and it packs people differently than maybe it does us. And so we were being as respectful yeah. to that, you know, what that questionnaire was actually meant for. But recognizing that at the same time, like, looking at it from just, you know,
the historical
point of view, that bunny trail that took me on was kind of like a, this is really cool.
And it's eye-opening.
Well, yeah, because you realize just how long it's been going on, and I'm not trying to be ignorant to the fact that humans have had an art form and have perfected or kind of like cultivated this art form.
But now we're just part of that. Like,
yeah,
it's been over 1,000 years since that first sock.
Well,
and now we're part of that history.
And that's the thing. This is just recorded history. Yeah. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been going on longer.
Oh, yeah, it could have been going on since the beginning.
This is just, you know, whenever the craft was originated, I have no idea. But like I said, it's so cool when you look into history and realize how fleshed out these problem-solving tools that we have just kind of like in us, to just inherently be like, I need this solved. I need to figure out how to do this efficiently. I don't want to waste my resources. And eventually you craft a tool and you craft materials to be able to provide you with what you need to be able to do that. And when you see people that kind of like live out in the bush and kind of do it out off of scratch, and you see even on their own journey of learning how to do things off of their own time and their own way.
Right.
That not everything is just taught. Some of it just comes innately, and some of this stuff is like we have similar problem solving techniques, obviously, but it feels so cool when you realize that several different parts of the world could have came up with this at different times without even ever meeting each other, and the history of it, and they might have had different names for it, but now as we know it today and how it has impacted and how it's even translated it to just us filming it as a thing that we love to do and wanting to share it with you is like it
like puts it all together for us.
Yeah.
But even the verse that we chose today. Now in Exodus 35:25, that was way back in history as well. So the verse today is, every skilled woman spun with her hands and brought what she had spun, blue, purple, or scarlet yarn, or fine linen. Now, I did draw a picture of this. When I was doing my drawings, I did 26 days of the alphabet and I made it biblical. So I wanted to draw yarn for Y, and this was the verse that I chose. And back then, they used to spin with their hands. They didn't have the spinning wheel, or they might not have had it in their area or whatever. God was asking the women to make cloth and
For their tabernacle.
yeah, for the tabernacle, and to use their skills to make yarn and to make thread. And
they were coming from Egypt.
Yeah, and they were coming from Egypt.
Yeah,
so they were doing it with their hands, and so that's what I drew a picture of. And so they were spinning the wool with their hands to make the yarn and the thread, so that they could use it for curtains and the outfits for the priests. And so, and he was very specific. He wanted blue, purple, and scarlet. And so I wanted to tell you that as well, is that, you know, when God is involved with this, he puts certain things into us that we can call talent or skill or whatever, but it's God dropping it into us. And as people who, you know, as women who are part of the history of this now, we just wanted to share that with you. We wanted to make sure that you knew that, you know, we're trying to put the history out there for you too, so that you can enjoy that part of it for yourselves, to realize that you are part of this as well.
Well, like, I know that earlier in our filmography, our earlier episodes, when we were still at my place when we used to regularly film.
Right.
I used to, and I still do have these, I used to collect all the old pattern books.
Yes.
Because of the style and the techniques.
Yeah.
And I don't care for all of them, right? Like, in the sense of, they might not be my style or era of crafts.
Right.
But I like them because there's something about it where it feels like a pull to the past. Like a this was used this way culturally
at this time. Yeah.
This is what was popular to do, and what people were buying to look up and try to make, and because, like, you see these crafts where it's like, oh, you crocheted a beanie, or you knitted a beanie for yourself, because beanies are very popular right now. Or it's one of those, like, oh, you did an affinity scarf, because that's popular right now, and it's part of our time period. But when you even look in like the 1970s or in that era, when you see the crafts that they were trying to do, or the things that they were making for their kids or for their husbands or even for themselves, because most of them were kind of aimed towards women, not that it has to be, because obviously this craft is very versatile, but just how the books were likely written and angled for. It's just so interesting, right? I find it very rewarding, kind of, to realize that, you know, just kind of like you said, what we're a part of, but, you know, it wasn't just that, just recognizing that this has a rich history, and just not even realizing it, and I don't feel like people talk about it.
Right. And now you know.
So
the rest of the story.
So this might be a tangent that I might be on for a while, but, I don't know, maybe next week I'll pull some of those out and see if we can see some, like, the differences over the...
over the decades.
That I do have, because
I
don't know how old my patterns are. I know I have some older patterns because I did inherit some of my oldest patterns from my great-grandma Udall. Mm-hmm. When she was making toy clothes... And I just find that great, that I feel like I come by making toy stuff, honestly.
Yes. And, you know, it's passed down.
Yeah, so, all right. I know we kind of went on a bit of a tangent, and like I said, it was a little bit different today. All the theme was still the same, and this is what we love to talk about, but it's one of those things where it's like, I like when we are able to share a kind of more of our
Yes.
broader interests with the craft, and so I am excited to kind of share this with you as well. So,
Thanks for sticking with us.
yeah, so as always, we hope that you are having a great rest of your day and that you are enjoying whatever you are working on. And, if there's something from your part of the world or whatever you know of the craft that I might have not mentioned or might be unaware of, or even just, memories that you might have of how it was used,
Right.
whether it be like a memory passed down from your grandma or your grandpa or whoever might have influenced this with you or presented this craft with you, please let us know.
Yeah.
We would love to have those memories shared in the comments below.
Yeah.
So,
And subscribe, like, and comment.
yes. So, as always, we enjoy hanging out with you. We hope that you have a good rest of your day, and we hope that you stitch your way
To mental health.